Tonight, an out-front investigation. American Police Department is under fire for responding to threats with bullets. Dozens have been killed by cops in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and now the Justice Department is getting involved.
What you're about to see is horrific. This mentally disturbed homeless man camping in the hills above Albuquerque, New Mexico, will soon fall victim to police bullets.
I'm telling you this evening. I am Department of Defense.
After hours of negotiations and surrounded by heavily armed officers, James Boyd agrees to leave. Then suddenly, this.
Done! Done!
A flash grenade. Boyd turns his back. Police open fire. As he gasps for breath, police sick a dog on his leg.
Beanbag! Beanbag!
They fire beanbags at his arms, then handcuff him as you hear the 38-year-old man slowly dying. The autopsy revealed he was shot in the back, a homicide. Boyd's is not the only questionable killing here. 27-year-old Christopher Torres, a schizophrenic who lived with his parents, was shot and killed in his pajamas in his own backyard. When two plainclothes police officers hopped this fence, officers claim he was armed and shot him in the back.
At most, he's holding a broom?
A broom. He had a broomstick, but he laid the broomstick down and had no weapons. Was backing up from the officers when they attacked him.
What happened to the two officers that killed your son?
They got, what, 3-4 days paid vacation?
Are they still on the force?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Despite officer-involved shooting rate twice that of Chicago, 8 times that of New York, not a single Albuquerque police officer has even been charged, let alone convicted, of using excessive force in the last 30 years. Not one. District Attorney Carrie Brandenburg cleared the two officers who killed Christopher Torres, just as she has cleared every other police shooting in the city during her last 13 years in office. Her explanation, she can only believe what the police tell her.
And do I understand this right? Nobody from this department actually went out and talked to these two officers? You relied on the statements that these officers wrote up after the incident?
So we have to rely on police reports. That's what we have to rely on.
Gordon Eden is Albuquerque's new police chief. His job is to change the culture here. That came into question just days after he joined the force and sided with the officers in the James Boyd shooting.
There has not been a single prosecution of a police officer. And from what I understand, there might not have been any discipline doled out to a police officer.
I can only speak to since I've been here. I can't speak at all to what has happened in the past. I can't speak at all to what has happened in the past. I can't speak at all to what has happened in the past.
APD's new chief says the police shooting that killed a homeless man in the foothills is justified. The video shows the suspect turning away as officers fire. News 13's Chris McKee was there. He's now in the Newsplex with more.
Yeah, Kim, at a news conference today, Chief Gordon Eden released video from Officer Dominic Perez's helmet camera. He fired 3 shots. Now, we paused the video there where the suspect, James Boyd, appears to be turning away from officers and the first shots are fired. This home video shows the man before the shooting. Police say 38-year-old James M. Boyd is the man who was killed. Boyd was arguing with police for hours last Sunday in the foothills after officers tried to talk to him about illegally camping. At the press conference today, Chief Eden said officers Keith Sandy and Dominic Perez on the left fired their rifles 3 times. But he called the shooting justified today, saying officers also used non-lethal force, first throwing a flashbang, then releasing a dog, and simultaneously using a taser gun and beanbag rounds. Chief Eden said officers fired because Boyd made a direct threat at the canine officer who was unarmed.
Actually, if you watch the videotape, all the less than lethal devices were in fact deployed.
Now, there are still a lot of unanswered questions surrounding the shooting. Albuquerque police would not say if one or both officers' bullets hit the suspect or how many times he was hit. And more than once, the police department tried to end today's news conference as reporters continue to ask questions.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. We're good.
Keith Sandy, the officer who fired first, does have a storied past. We told you on special assignment earlier this week how Sandy was fired from state police for time card fraud. He was facing possible criminal charges for doing private security work while on the clock. In 2007, he was hired on by APD anyway. Back then, the department told us he would not carry a gun or have a badge. But as you can see, that obviously did not stick.
So, Drew, you know, that video, just here in the studio watching that, everybody's jaws were dropping. I mean, it was horrific. It appears to be so cold-blooded. They negotiated for hours. Then he turns his back and they start shooting. He's clearly mentally ill. The dog being sicked on his leg. I mean, it's horrible. You hear him dying. Is there any explanation that we could be missing for why all these police would have done that?
You know, in our interview with the police chief, I asked him specifically, Aaron, tell me, what am I missing here? What am I not seeing? He didn't offer anything. And
now you've got months going on, and of course this happened in the past. I mean, are those officers still working? They still have jobs?
The 3 main officers were involved in that video portion. There were dozens of other officers there.
Right.
But of these 3, 2 of them are back on the force. They are on desk duty. A 3rd officer remains on leave. They're all still getting paid.
And as I reported earlier, in New Mexico, they have changed the police academy training to a shoot-first curriculum in spite of all these shootings, in spite of all this abuse. And they had a police academy instructor say that he would refuse to teach that curriculum because it was a shoot-first curriculum. He was subsequently let go.
This is the spot that we're going to be heading to where James Boyd was brutally assassinated, murdered by Albuquerque police in a military-style assault. The crime that he was accused that brought that military-style force is right here. It's a City of Albuquerque open spaces regulations. It's not a criminal offense of any nature, and it just says that the activity prohibited that he was doing was camping. Now, of course, what he was a homeless man looking to get away from the people and just be on his own and get somewhere that he could just be by himself. And you couldn't get much more remote or by yourself than what I see here. But you can see up in that distance, those rocky outcrops is where we're headed. Certainly trying to get away from everybody and to be out of the way and not be seen or bothered or bother anyone. But that didn't seem to matter in terms of his life.
So we have even right there.
What's his name?
This is an emergency transmission from FEMA Region 6 in occupied North America. There is a war. It's happening now. It will decide the fate of humanity. The time to choose sides has come. We are the resistance.